All right, welcome to JC Sports Network YouTube page. This is a regular podcast on JC Sports. If you're new to the channel or you're a recent subscriber, we changed the name from Between the Whistles to JC Sports because of some technicalities, and we're just clearing it up with you because this is the first time I've done a video in a long time. I'm going to be more consistent this year. I had a lot of things go down last year that was out of my control, but let's get to it. The NHL Draft was tonight. I'm doing this video at 11:34, so I'm a little bit kind of tired, but we're gonna get to it. So, the Detroit Red Wings selected Michael Brunsieg Nagard. I think it is. I don't know. I'm gonna say he's MBN for the rest of the video. I swear to God. He was drafted 15th overall, 6'1", 207. NHL comparison from a scout friend of mine. The high end comparison, which is if this happens, I'm going to lose my shit because if the 15th overall pick is kind of it's a track meet. You know, JT Miller was one of those picks. He became a great player, but if he becomes a Matthew Tkachuk, like my scout friend says, this is going to be great. The low end comparison is Arturi Lehkonen, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'd be totally fine with that as well. That's a great comparison. Both great comparisons. I'd obviously love to have the Matthew Tkachuk. We're to get into why he kind of resembles Matthew Tkachuk in certain ways later in the video. What is his game? When I asked my scout friend, what is his game? He said the 200-foot game, great shot, elite on the forecheck, and he has grit personified. And when you look at teams that win in the playoffs, they have to have that one thing, grit and physicality, and can they get their shot off in traffic? Those are two of the biggest things. I think that's why Florida won the Stanley Cup over the Edmonton Oilers. I think that, you know, the only thing with them with the Florida is I really don't think we would have went to Game 7 if they could really defend a breakaway. They gave a lot of breakaways to the Edmonton Oilers, and the Edmonton Oilers were really doing a great job of doing that. But the reason that, you know, you have breakaways is because your forwards don't get back enough. And when you look at what Detroit has drafted over and over again, you look at guys like Marco Kasper, Nate Danielson, guys that they're the same thing, two-way forwards that play a 200-foot game. But the one thing you could say about MBN is he has a great shot. I remember I was watching the World Juniors, and there was a play that personified MBN to a T. It was a race for the puck. He physically held off on his own. He said he basically kept the guy on his back and got to it in time, and he had enough reach to where he can get to the next level. He hits a little bit of the afterburners. He gets a little jump on him, and then he just wrist shots that boy right to the net, knocks the water bottle off. Just a fantastic shot. I was gonna put it up on this video, but for the reasons of potentially getting a copyright claim, I'll put it on my TikTok, Joe Chap Sports. So go to that. But when you look at this draft pick, I was interested why he said Matthew Tkachuk. And when we look at this tweet from Precious Lift, I can't say his name, but one of the key guys in the Red Wings community who is an analytics guy. When you look at that offensive red, see how the direction is going towards the red at the bottom of the screen? Look at the board battles that he's winning. Look at the board battles he's winning in the defensive zone. So basically what this outlines right here is he's good against the boards, he's great against the boards, and he's a 200-foot player. That's what that personifies right there. He says, looking at data for where he passes the puck from, and you'll see a lot of involvement on the right side with D-zone exits that have a heavy amount of cycle work in the O-zone and some movement to the tops of the face-off dots. So this is his passing right there, but you could tell that like he's good along the boards because when you're passing from those areas, it pretty much shows that you're a pretty good player along the boards. So I'm very interested. When I was talking to my scout friend, he just got done drafting. That's why I kind of have this video out late. But when he was telling me, like, you know, the reason that he kind of sees a little bit of Matthew Tkachuk in him is because of what he's able to do. You know, and he's able to be great around the boards, good forechecker, but one of the things that he can really do is make you pay. And my scout friend, who I've had for a while, and I've leaned on him for a lot of scouting reports on Red Wings players because he's in a main region where, the Red Wings do a lot of their uh, drafting in that European style. But when you look at guys like Sandin Pellikka, he told me early on that he reminded him. My scout friend said he reminded him of like a Eric Carlson type. I mean, and then you started seeing Eric Carlson comparisons. So I thought it was really good to bring him back and kind of see what he thought about it. But I'll show you what he thought about it. This was his opinion on MBN. Classic Wings pick. His floor is great. Ceiling is high. His compete level is high. This is another example of Wings picking a player before he explodes. He mentions Raymond. He mentions Danielson as guys that like you drafted them before they really exploded. Like if you redrafted, I think Raymond would go higher than you picked him. I think Danielson would go higher than you picked him. Detroit has a lot of the same forwards, but interested to see what they do to compensate that. It's interesting you said that because obviously if you're a Red Wings fan, you have seen Steve Eisman draft a player that's good, 200-foot player in Marco Casper. You've seen a guy like Nate Danielson, another guy who's a 200-foot player. Both of them are centers, but this guy's a winger, and I think this shows what CVY is trying to build. I mean, a lot of people love Patrick Kane. I thought he had a great year last year. Obviously, he was fantastic. I think he was close to a point per game player. But there's times last year where he didn't get back on the forecheck. He didn't do this, and some of those plays can really be the difference in a game. Like if you don't get back and you let this guy go and he scores, like it's just not a good instance. Like one of the reasons that the Toronto Maple Leafs has such a hard time winning in the playoffs is because guys like Mitch Marner, guys like some of their players that they have, they're not 200-foot players. They want the offensive stats, but they don't want to put the work in to make that happen. So when I look at guys like MBN, it's a great pick for the Detroit Red Wings because if the Detroit Red Wings can just hone in and get the guys that match match their skill set, their scheme, you're going to be in a lot better of a position than a lot of other people. But I asked him, there was a one player in particular I thought I was going to ask him about because I thought this is a guy a lot of Red Wings fans wanted. I heard it on the page of the Red Alert page, and I asked him why. Like, why do you think they didn't draft Cole Eiserman? And this was his opinion. Or the reason teams pass on him, I think, unless you show an elite playmaking skill. He mentioned Patrick Kane. He mentioned Austin Matthews. I think teams that can't take the risk should steer clear. Would have never guessed the Islanders would have taken him. He later went on and said, like guys like there's so many players in the league that are coming in the league from either Canada in the OHL or the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League or the WHL or the U.S. National Development Team. They come in a little bit. I don't want to say they're lazy or they don't get back in time. They kind of show that they're not like they're one-trick ponies, and that's what you try to avoid. I think one of the things that really cost Ken Holland at the end was the Philip Zadina draft pick. And that was what was said about Philip Zadina when he was drafted. He's a great player. Offensively, he's a great player, but if he can't, get that shot off, he's basically useless. And you saw that in Detroit. Like if there was times that he would shoot the puck and you'd be like, wow, that's great. But then there was times where like he couldn't get space on the ice. He couldn't find the way to get open. And that's just some of the things that you deal with these younger players. I mean, they come from leagues where they dominate because of their skill set, but they're not foundationally. They're not. They're not. Their foundation is their skill. It's not like their smart IQ, and that's the best way to put it. You know, this is a passing chart for MBN. As you can see, he does a lot of board work. Up around the dots. Like this guy is a damn good player. He's a 200-foot player, and If you watch the World Juniors with Norway, he was a very keen player, like really good player. That was fantastic. This is his shot coverage. Crash Smith put this out here. Great follow if you're an analytics person, but this is his shots on the power play. You see the red, like he's right around that dot, and that's where you kind of want a guy. He's a right-handed shot, so obviously he loves that top of the right circle. So look, if this kid could be anything, I hope he is just he could help us win a championship. I think that him being a good 200-foot player is absolutely massive. If he could be a good player for the Detroit Red Wings moving forward and be an Arteri Lehkonen, that's a win. If he's a Matthew Tkachuk, it's a total win. If he's a JT Miller, JT Miller was a 15th overall pick, even better. I think that, if you get those guys where you draft, that's crucial. I mean, look at what Steve Eisman did with Sandin Pellikka last year. That was a gift. And they got Sandin Pellikka, and Pellikka looks like he's going to be a legitimate star at the defenseman. And Nate Danielson had a great year. So these are just the things that you look at, like the little things that matter. Like MBN might not be this flashy guy, but in the end, like the best players in the league are 200-foot players. Like you've seen Connor McDavid be a 200-foot player. You've seen Austin Matthews develop into a 200-foot player. Not as good as Willie Nylander, but you see guys like Marchand and Crosby, and those are 200-foot players that are just really good at what they do. But Barkov for the Florida Panthers is one of the best 200-foot players in the league. And if you could be a little bit like that, you're going to be in a good situation. So obviously MBN has the offensive he has the shot to be a good player. He has the 200-foot game to be a compete his compete level is going to be really, really high. And I think that the reason that Steve Eisman put this guy as his draft pick this time around is because when you look at the other guys, like I'm sure there were some draft interviews that didn't go good. I can tell you that right now. I think that there were some interviews that were said that they had with maybe a guy like Eisenman or maybe a guy like Hag or whatever the case may be. One of the guys that's they passed on. I imagine a draft interview didn't go good or wasn't up to Stevie's snuff. I mean, look, like my scout friend that said, a lot of teams that are in like the 20s, they could take chances like that. Like you could take a chance on a Cole Eiserman and think that maybe he develops into something, right? But a team like the Red Wings, they can't really take that shot. Now, going through the rest of that draft, I think the Detroit Red Wings need to be a little bit more less in their in their philosophical ways and kind of go outside the boundaries. I love the Dmitry Buchenikov draft last year. 2 years ago, I think it was. Yeah, 2 years ago. I thought that was a great draft pick. So guys like that, if they can just get guys that are just kind of like offensively high reward guys, I think that could help this team out moving forward. But good draft pick by the Detroit Red Wings today. I think that when we look back at this draft pick, it's gonna be a win. I do think that. There's not many picks that Steve Eisman has made that I've kind of scoffed at. One of the picks that I really loved when it came out, and Cindy, my co-host of the Red Alert podcast, she could say it was a Seider pick. I did like Seider, and I did like Raymond. So those were two guys that I did like. I didn't think they were going to draft them there, but Steve has an identity that he matches with, and that's the identity that he goes with. So good first day for the Detroit Red Wings. They had a very good, just a good draft pick of MBN. I think that's going to really boost them forward. But look, we're going to get into a lot of free agents and trades and everything like that. There's going to be a lot of Red Wings news coming down the pike. So if you're new to the channel, subscribe. We're going to keep you up to date. This is kind of like a longer video. I'm sorry for being kind of like not being myself, of being just kind of like I'm, it's 11:30 at night. I'm it's just this draft went too long, and that last pick of with Edmonton went way too long, and I'm glad that we're done with the night. But we'll see you tomorrow as we talk more Red Wings hockey. We'll look at the second through seventh round draft picks. I'll tell you the ones I like, tell you ones I don't like, and we'll talk about that on the next JC Sports Network YouTube video with the regular podcast. Thank you for watching, and we will see you tomorrow on some more NHL Red Wings hockey.